Next, I'm going to share with you the align command. The align function itself, it's a very important command to master, because many a times we are faced with forms that are non-rectilinear or forms that are really quite irregular. So it is very difficult for us to establish a place that we can snap to. For example, tangents and so on. So therefore, it is important for us to know how to use the align tool so that we can get things aligned nicely. Let's start with this exercise here. If you take a look, there are 4 objects inside this scene itself, and only one, which is the cube, is a rectilinear geometry. The rest are pretty curvy, if not irregular in that sense. So if we were to use snaps to attempt to put everything together, it will become pretty challenging. So what we're going to do is, let me just activate the grid here so that you can have a better feel of the ground here. Alright, so let me just move on to where the icon for align is going to be. This is where the align command is, and you find that it will not work unless we select an object first. Let's get some understanding on the concepts of align in 3D Studio Max. Let's say we want to align the cone to the center of the cube itself. So what's going to happen is I would need to choose the object that I want to move or align before I activate the command here, like that. And if you notice the prompt at the lower left hand corner here, 3D Studio Max will prompt you to pick align target object. So what we're going to do is we are going to use the box as the align target object by clicking on it. And when we do this already, the align selection dialog box will appear, and we need to understand that the align command here has a bracket screen here. That means this command is actually very screen specific. If you are working on the top view, then we need to concentrate on the locations X, Y, and Z in the top viewport here. If I were to click on X position here, you notice that the cone now shifts to the center here. This is because we have chosen by default the source object to be center as the reference, and then the target object's center as its reference as well. So where exactly is the center of this object? To explain this a little bit clearer, now this cone itself in the top view is going to appear almost like a circle. We can almost divide these into 3 parts here. So the first part here, this part here will be the minimum, and which is this one down here, and the center will be down at the center point here. Now remember x-axis, right? We are looking at x-axis at the moment, so the x-axis will run along this way down here, and the center, this will be the center here at this point. And then there's one more option down here, which is the pivot point over here. The pivot point actually refers to the pivot point here, this X and Y icon that you're seeing here. Now this pivot point can be adjusted as we go along the chapters and all, but we're not going to worry about it for now. And then let me explain, the final portion here will be the maximum here. So the maximum actually refers to this line down here, this portion here. This is the maximum. So that's pretty much how it works. Let's go to the target object now. The target object. So we know that the cube in its top view is now the square, which is the target object. So the target object's minimum will be this line here. It's along the x-axis. Alright, we got to understand this one first. So it's at this point here as a line, pretty much. And the center point here is the center point down here, this one. So this will be the minimum, and this will be the center. And I'm not going to talk about the pivot point first for now, and I'm going to go to the maximum here. So the maximum will be referring to this line down at this point here, which is the maximum. Okay, so as long as we have this understanding on how it works based on the x position, then we will have good understanding of how this align function would work already. If you click on the y position here, the concept is the same, except right now it is moving towards basically moving towards the y axis here, along the y axis. So again, the center point would be here along this line. This will be the center point, and then the minimum will be this line. This will be the minimum now, and this line here will be the maximum. This is for the current or the source object. And then as we move on to the reference object, the target object here, we are going to refer to this box down here. This box down here, because that was the cube that we picked just now. So again, the minimum would now be this line here, minimum. And the center will be the center position here, the center. And we're not going to talk about this for now, and then we're going to talk about the maximum. So the maximum will be the line down here. This would be the maximum. Okay, so once we understand this, we would have no problems managing this part of the align command. So let me just show you very, very quickly. If I want to have everything all aligned nicely right in the middle or right at the center, I could have chosen center, center, and picked on X and Y position. Notice right now they are totally aligned together this way. I'm going to do the same for the rest as well. So once I'm done, I will click OK, and I'm going to select the sphere now and click on align again to pick on the cube object again, and I'm going to just leave it X and Y the same, center, center, and click OK. And lastly, the most tricky one, which is the teapot itself. So the teapot really doesn't have any tangent for us to snap to or to align to. So that one's going to be difficult if we try to move it. So we're not going to use it, and we're going to use the align command again, and we're going to pick the cube center, center again. So as you can see, the outcome would be everything is all aligned to the same point, which is the center in the top view. But then if you now look at it in the front view, it is not, because we didn't do any alignment to it at all. So what can happen is we can use the align command one more time, bearing in mind that although everything is now centered in the top view here, but if we were to look at the front view, we will find that right now the object remains rather unaligned in the front view this way. This is because we haven't really done any alignment yet in the elevational view itself, which is the front view. Alright, and what would happen is we can go ahead and execute an alignment exercise to it, and then to make it centralized or centered to objects. So what's going to happen is I'm now going to select the cone again and click on the align command and click on the cube as a reference object or the target object here. Now notice when we didn't use any of the X, Y, Z positions here, nothing will happen. Many new users have this misunderstanding that because it is right now in an elevational position, I would want to use the Z position here and it will be centered. But if you look at it right now, it really doesn't move anything at this point. This is because we need to remember this part, that we are in the align command that uses the screen as an alignment. So again, if we are in the front elevation viewport right now, you can see from it being selected because there is a yellow colored frame around the viewport here. So again, our understanding now becomes again, this will be an XY view right now. So right now we shouldn't look at this as a Z position here. This is the part that gets a little bit confusing. It's not Z position, but in fact this is still Y position, this is X position. Alright, so therefore if I want to make the cone align exactly in the center position of the cube, then I will need to make the cone go up or down this way. So therefore I need to use the Y-axis. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on Y position instead, and now I will be able to align it in the center of the cube itself. So I'll click OK, and I'll repeat again the demonstration by clicking on the sphere and click on the align command and use the cube as the reference object again. So now notice it has aligned or moved to the center of the cube, and I'll click OK, and then one more time align again, and I'm going to use the cube as the reference object. Now notice there is a slight position change when it comes to the alignment position of the teapot this way. So once this is done, I'm going to align this one in the front so that it all stacks up in one center position, but it will stack one on top of each other, just on the right position. I am now going to keep the teapot at the base, and then I'm going to stack all the objects upwards here, starting with the cone itself. So I'm going to select the cone, click on align, and click on teapot as the reference object, and this time round I'm going to click on the Y position, and I'm going to use the minimum position of the cone to be at the maximum position of the teapot. So I'm going to choose the minimum of the cone and then the maximum position of the teapot this way, and I'm going to click OK. And next I'm going to work on the sphere, and I'm going to click on the align command and choose the cone as the reference object. So right now we can see that the tip of the sphere, it's now touching the tip of the cone itself. And I'll click OK. Zooming out a little bit. Next, I will select the cube to be aligned, and I will click on the align command again and click on the sphere to be the reference object and click OK. This way. And next part of the exercise here, I will make a clone of this. I will clone a copy of this set of objects, and I am going to next the next exercise. I am going to try to invert everything upside down. That means the object at the top will go down to become the object at the bottom, and then I will change the positions using the align command by changing all these objects again. So I will start by selecting the cube and clicking on the align command and using the teapot's base here to be the reference object position. So I will click on it. I will use the minimum point of the cube to be aligned to the minimum point of the teapot here, and I will click OK. And next I will select the sphere and click align, and this time around I will use the cube to be the reference object, and I will use the minimum point of the sphere, which is here, to be aligned to the maximum point of the cube here, and I'll click OK. Next I will work on the cone, and I'll click align and use the sphere to be the reference object. So the minimum point of the cone will be here, and the maximum point of the sphere will be here, and I will click OK. And lastly, I would select the teapot and click on align and use the cone to be the target object here. So the teapot's minimum point would be here along y-axis, and the maximum point of the source of the reference object, which is the cone, will be at the top of the point here this way. So it's going to end up looking like this. We move on to the next exercise by creating another clone of it, holding the shift key and dragging it to the right, and to make one more copy here. So with this, I'm going to create everything. I'm going to create this set using the align exercise that would have the objects cascading this way along the XY plane on the screen down here. So what's going to happen is I'm going to now select the sphere. This part here will test our understanding of the align command a little bit further by working in the 3D view itself. So in the 3D view itself, understanding of the screen coordinates becomes a little bit more important here. So I'm going to select the sphere and clicking on the align command and using the cube as the reference object. So remember, understanding the dialog box becomes really important. Right now, if you notice, the align position no longer works in screen mode, but it in fact uses the world coordinates. When we're talking about the world coordinates, this part becomes important. The XYZ reference here becomes valid. That means the X position here will refer to along this axis, and the Y position here will refer to this axis here, and the Z position will be referring to what is moving upwards here, the Z position here. And with this, I know now the position of the sphere's minimum would be down here, and we want to use the maximum position corner of the cube to become the minimum of the sphere. So I'm going to click OK, and this is what would happen this way. Let me just show you another example like this. So now I'm going to select the cone, and I'm going to align it in such a way that the cone will now end up at this point somewhere along here, because this will be the maximum point of the XY for the sphere itself here. So right now I will click on Align again and click on Sphere, and if you notice, I'm still using the X and the Y position. So the minimum position now of the cone is actually down at this point here, and the maximum position of the target object, it will be down at this point here also. So that's why it appears that they are actually quite far apart, but in fact it is exactly at the point down at this spot here, this way. And lastly, I'm going to use let me just click OK first, and lastly I will use the teapot, and I will click on Align one more time, and the same principle would apply here as well. So as you can see, it now works like this. The last exercise here, I'm going to select and make another clone of this. This time now, we're going to do everything back in reverse again. So I'm going to select the sphere, and then I'm going to click on the target object, which is the cube here, and I'm going to choose the maximum of the sphere and the minimum of the cube, and click OK. And I'm going to repeat the exercise now by clicking on the cone Align command and using the sphere as the reference object. Cone, Align, and sphere, and OK. And lastly, I'm going to select the teapot and click on Align, and clicking on the cone as the reference object, and OK. So as you can see right now, it will end up looking like this. I hope you can have a better understanding of the Align command after practicing with this tutorial.